What's up everyone, welcome back to another video. This is Travis here. Now this is going to be the very first video in the 300 gallon build series, and we're going to be talking about the rock. Now as you guys can see, there's quite a bit here, and we're going to get into what type it is, how much there is, and how I go about getting it ready to go into 300 gallon build. So let's go and get started. Alright, first things first, let's go and talk about what type of rock this is. Now if you don't immediately recognize it, it's actually Pukani dry rock, and I picked it up from bulkreefsupply.com. Now there is approximately 200 pounds here, and if you guys have been here for a while, you remember my aquascaping video where I mentioned that I like to do 1 pound per gallon, and yes, 200 pounds is obviously doesn't add up to the 300 gallon display, but there's a couple of reasons why I decided to go this route. Now most of the time I aquascape with the Reef Saver dry rock, which is a pretty dense rock, and you actually, if you compare a 5-pound piece of Pukani next to a 5-pound piece of Reef Saver dry rock, the Pukani is much bigger and you tend to get more out of it. That reason is because it's really porous and there's a lot of room for beneficial bacteria. Now with that being said, my aquascaping theme, if you guys remember the 125 where I had the 3 pillars, now I do plan on continuing the pillar look over on the 300 gallon build, maybe doing 4 or 5 different pillars. And that type of aquascaping theme doesn't really require that much rock. Now I will supplement the biological filtration with marine pure blocks in the sump, just in case that 200 pounds really isn't enough to keep up with my stocking level. But either way, 200 pounds is definitely enough that at least I feel it's enough. And for whatever reason, if I'm aquascaping and it just doesn't add up to being enough rock, I can always purchase more and cure it and add it in at a later date. Now with all that being said, let's go to move into the process of getting this rock ready for the 300 gallon build. Now I like to cure all of my rock regardless of it being live or dry. It doesn't matter. Now some of you might be asking, why would you cure live rock? Well, basically, if you think about live rock when it's being transported from the ocean, it's getting exposed to air. Now what happens if it gets exposed to air? You have something on the rock that's going to die. Now once you add that rock to your main display tank and you add a light source, not only is it going to rot, but you have a good chance of it releasing nutrients into the tank and causing a nutrient issue, and then eventually growing algae, which is nothing, none of us want to deal with that crap. Now when it comes to dry rock, specifically Pukani, it definitely has a lot of die-off on it, and that stuff needs to rot and break down and be processed out via water changes before adding it to your main tank. If you don't do that, you're going to have algae issues. It's that simple. Anybody here on YouTube that is making videos telling people just throw Pukani into their tank without curing it, you're doing a disservice to the hobby, and you're really causing issues for people that doesn't need to happen. So if you're having dry rock or live rock, just take the time to cure it. It only takes a few weeks. I'm going to go ahead and let mine cure between 8 and 10 weeks just because I do have the time to do that. But honestly, 4 to 6 weeks is really all you need. And it's definitely time well spent because you're going to avoid months and months of nutrient issues. Alright, so now that we got that out of the way, let's go to move into the process of getting this set up. Now I'm going to go ahead and use utility pumps and attach some PVC. And as you can see, I put the utility pumps at the bottom of the barrel. Now what this does is it pumps water from the bottom to the top, and then it allows it to flow down through the rock and continues that whole process. I do recommend if you are using a utility pump that you actually care about, go ahead and put a screen over it or a sponge filter or something just to avoid any pieces of rock from getting sucked in. But these are old and they're pretty much dead as is, and frankly I don't care if they stop working. Either way, once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and take about half the rock, which is about 100 pounds, and put it in each barrel. And then it's a little tricky in the beginning because you kind of have to hold the pump there while you put rock in there. But once you have a couple pieces, it will hold in place, and then just stack around it. Try not to crush the pump or get it stuck in the inlet, and then you'll be good to go. Once you've added all the rock to the barrel, go ahead and fill it up with salt water. Now this is a pretty highly debated topic. I'm simply going to tell you what I'm doing this time and some of the things that I've done in the past that I've been successful with. Now, since I have a frag system that's obviously getting water changes every couple weeks, I'm going to go ahead and do a 50-gallon water change on the frag system and put 25 gallons of that water in each one of these barrels. After that, I'm going to go ahead and top it off with freshly mixed salt water, and I am going to use my HW Marine Mix salt mix for now, but I do plan on moving over to reef crystals just for these 2 barrels because it is a lot cheaper to run reef crystals than it is the HW Marine Mix, especially for just curing rock. It really doesn't matter. Now, I do understand that not everybody has the luxury of having a frag system. They can just simply take out 50 gallons of water and start this process. So for those of you who are just starting out fresh, you can definitely mix the salt water within the barrel. You don't have to use a separate barrel, but if you so choose to, it's might be easier for mixing purposes. But you can also use tap water if you want to do that. And I know that's kind of where the debate is at, if you should use tap water to start this process. But honestly, I've started the cycling process with tap water several times, and there's really no issue with it. It's not something you're going to want to use the entire process, but in the beginning for the first 1 or 2 weeks, tap water is totally fine, because honestly, if you see how dirty this water is after 2 weeks, I mean, you could have pissed in it and it would still be as dirty. It doesn't matter. So honestly, having a high TDS water in the beginning isn't a big deal, but understand that as your cycling process goes, you're going to want to replace that with fresh RODI water. That way you can remove those high nutrients and that high TDS. That way you don't have any issues with the rock once you get it into the main display. Now, once you have your water in there and you have it set to 1.025 or 0.26 salinity, you're going to go ahead and add your heater. Now, I like to use plastic heaters because there's a less chance of the heater breaking if the rock kind of moves around or whatever. And I mean, I've never had a heater actually break in here, but the rock does shift. So if you accidentally have a heater kind of pinch in between the rock and it shifts, you can definitely break the heater. So one quick note on that is try to get heaters either like titanium or plastic that won't break. And if you do get glass, try to keep it on top of the rock and not in between. And also connecting your heaters to a GFCI outlet just in case, so you don't get electrocuted, is a good thing for sure. Now, when it comes to temperature, I personally like to keep mine around 79 degrees. And honestly, I have gotten away with cycling rock in room temperature, which is about 69, 70 degrees, as well as getting it around 81. There was no issue with that. Now, I do feel that beneficial bacteria does grow faster in the higher 78, 79 range. So that's kind of where I like to keep it. And also, that's where I keep my reef tank. So it just kind of works out that way. Well, guys, that's about it for my setup. It's pretty easy. Now, the only thing I've ever done differently in the past is I would add a piece of live rock from my main display, which has the beneficial bacteria already on it. And then, of course, that would kind of help jumpstart the whole process. But I didn't do this time just because of the fact that I'm going to be cycling this rock for 10 weeks and I'm not really in any kind of rush. Now, speaking of rush, there are some people out there that like to go ahead and put acid into this rock to clean it quicker. I'm not a big fan of that kind of stuff. I simply let nature do its thing. And the hobby's all about having patience. So if you can't wait for your rock to cure naturally, then you're probably not going to do very well in the hobby long term. Now, there's one more thing I want to mention before we kind of close up the video, and that is when you are curing your rock, you want to go ahead and put a cover on it. The reason for this is, especially for those of you who do it inside, I know that I do, the smell of curing rock is pretty nasty stuff, and it's going to be in a basement where the moisture is already a little high, and yeah, it's just a bad smell, especially Pukani. Now, also, keeping a cover on it will cut down on the evaporation, so you won't have to top it off as often, so that's definitely a good thing. Now, when it comes to maintenance, I'm going to go ahead and perform a 50% water change with reef crystals every 2 weeks from this point forward. Now, it kind of depends on really how the rock is starting to look. If I find that after every 2 weeks that the water still looks like crap, I'm going to go ahead and increase the water change to every week 50% and then just move forward with that. Now, once we get around the 7 or 8 week mark, I'm going to go ahead and start testing nitrites, nitrates, and phosphates to kind of see where we're at. And then once we have just nitrates and phosphates in the water, then I know that we're good enough to go ahead and put that into the reef tank. So guys, that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it somewhat entertaining. Now, I will be doing updates on this, showing you the water changes and then testing the water and then eventually putting it into the 300-gallon tank. So stay tuned for all of that. Now, if you do have any questions, please put it in the comment section below and I will do my best to get back to you as quickly as possible to answer those. Now, along the lines of the questions, I have to mention this because I've been noticing it over the last couple of months and I've kind of been keeping it to myself. But there's certain people that have been coming to my channel and kind of bullying those of you who are new to the hobby and been asking me questions. And because it takes me so long to get back to people, they'll come in and say something completely off the wall, rude. And then I have to come through and delete them, block them, and then apologize to that person for somebody coming in and being a dickhead. So one quick note, if you are the person that knows everything, for one, you shouldn't be watching my channel. 2, you should be making your own channel or writing a book. And 3, you should just be fucking off because I don't have time for that stuff and I honestly don't have the patience. Either way, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and I'll see you next time. Peace.